Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. If you guys are new here, my name's Kish. I'm an entrepreneur.
Nice.
Based out of Phoenix, Arizona, and I talk things all business and lifestyle. So obviously, based on today's video, I'm gonna be showing you probably the best side hustle. I know you've heard that 100 times, whether here, TikTok, Twitter, doesn't really matter, but obviously we all have opinions. This might give you an idea of something you've probably never even heard before, or if you have, you just kind of brushed it off. So this is exactly how I started my entrepreneurship journey out of college. I did graduate, but I obviously did not use my career, and it led me to make a decent amount of money. So I hope you guys do enjoy. This isn't just a side hustle, it can be turned into a full-time thing. So with that said, if you guys find any value, don't forget to like, subscribe. You guys know what to do to show your appreciation. And with that said, let's get right into it. So not to take up too much of your time, but I think it is valuable to tell you a little bit about the backstory of my journey in phone flipping, because it is a good transition into why maybe you want to start it, because in my opinion, it is a really good side hustle for 2021, 2022, doesn't really matter. It's going to be around for a super long time because it's just a buying and selling game. But obviously the phone niche is a little bit different than couch flipping or flipping shoes or whatever you want to do to buy low, sell high. This is just another tool you can add to your belt. So when I was in college, it was in 2018, I graduated, and a couple months before that, I'd say probably about 6 months, I started in the phone flipping niche. I saw a YouTube video about it. I just am a guy that takes action and I don't really care about the consequence. I just went and bought a phone locally on OfferUp. I didn't know anything about carriers, financing of these phones, unlocking, iCloud. I just went and bought it, and luckily I did make money off of it. I went into it not knowing that there's a lot to talk about in the phone flipping niche, but once you learn it, it's just a rinse and repeat process. And a good blueprint, if you guys are just wondering about the phone flipping market, is what is the profit margin. So on every single device, I like to get about $100 profit after shipping, if I do end up shipping it, or I even take into account time holding that device. But typically with some of the things I'll talk about in the video, I was always able to flip that device within the day or possibly over the weekend. Once I bought that first phone in college, I just kept repeating the process, and obviously I took a lot of misses, I took a lot of losses, I made a bunch of mistakes, but I kind of failed forward in the industry, and I ended up turning it into more than just a side hustle, into a full-time income. So that's definitely a benefit of potentially getting into this niche. And one thing I should note is there isn't really a cap. There's different ways you can transition to make this $1 million business if you want it to be eventually. But if you're just here for a couple $100, that's great too. But I'll get into that full-time $1 million business potential later in the video, so definitely stick around. But kind of finishing that backstory, I ended up finishing college, and I decided at that point I was making enough money to kind of overcome what a 9-to-5 would be, and I just liked being an entrepreneur. I already got that taste of what it was like to work my own hours and just kind of do what I want during the day. For me, and especially in the beginning, I had the mindset that I really just needed to do one deal a day to be able to make a full-time income off of it, but obviously take into account that that was 7 days a week. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier, but every device, my goal was to make probably between $100 and $200 profit. As I was going through my phone flipping journey, I started to realize that I really just needed to pick a niche because of what I was comfortable with, and that was iPhones. Obviously there is iPads, MacBooks, Androids, iPhones. There's tons of different kind of devices that you can flip. And if you're comfortable with all of them, I definitely recommend trying them all out. But there are different logistics and technicalities to each and one of them, as well as a different buyer market that you need to keep in mind when you're going ahead and trying to flip that item. I started out with iPhones because that's something I was just super comfortable with. I owned an iPhone, so if I were you, I would recommend doing whatever kind of device or people will call it family you're in, whether that's Androids or iPhones. And with that said, starting at a much cheaper device and working your way up until those more expensive ones, where there is a risk reward because the more expensive ones, typically you're going to make a bigger profit margin. One thing I also should note, and probably will get questioned, so I'll cover this right now, is I've never really tapped into fixing them. It was just something that I didn't see the ROI on. You needed to spend a decent amount of time and risk and liability on yourself for fixing devices. If you want, I'd recommend trying on like faulty devices to fix a broken screen. But for me, I never wanted to take that risk of sitting in a McDonald's, not in a good environment, meeting up with somebody, fixing that device 30 minutes with the potential to create a lot of damage that I would just have to pay out of pocket for and obviously lose out on all profits. Even though I did not fix these, I did buy phones that were obviously broken, water damaged, or just a different price point for them. And as I got a little bit deeper into the industry, and if you guys get into it as well, one thing to keep in mind and look out for are there are actually big buyers out there. So the phone industry isn't just local, it's not buying and selling. There are big players that do things that I don't even want to know about, that ship them out internationally, and again, that's not some space that I necessarily wanted to get into. Because of the liability, there's technicalities, and if you guys want to learn more about that, I have about 150 to 200 videos on this channel, released just a few years ago, so you can check those out. All of those still pretty much apply except for the price points of these phones. But there's things like iCloud lock, phones can get reported, you have to be making sure that they are paid off. So there's a lot of things you have to keep in mind, but it's all a risk-reward thing. But in terms of the big players again, one thing I started to realize was, and sometimes the people that I did end up kind of mentoring along the process, was you don't just have to buy local and sell local. That can entail a higher return or a higher profit for you because the general consumer just pays high. But instead of that, what you could do and kind of automate the process a little bit is buy local and then sell to a bigger company. So this means you're taking the phone, shipping it out, and you don't run that risk of potentially meeting with somebody and them maybe running away with that phone. So that is a cool benefit if you do want to go down that route. These bigger companies are obviously just another middleman. One thing I started to realize about this industry was it's just a bunch of middlemans where somehow the price of that phone will get up to somebody really high where they're going to use it for some reason. Most of the time that phone will go out somewhere else in the world. But when you're selling to these kind of bigger buyers, they have set prices for all these devices based on the carrier, the gigabyte, and all that technical stuff. So if you meet with one, you'll be able to get some sort of like Google spreadsheet I saw a lot of the time. They'll tell you a price of this iPhone X 64 gigabyte Verizon, good condition, we'll buy it for $400 just as an example. So you can go ahead into the marketplace on your local app like Facebook, Craigslist, OfferUp, and then just bid on these phones and dictate your own profit margin. So if you wanted to make $50 and you saw somebody selling it for $350, obviously you have to take into account shipping and stuff like that, but without it you're making $50 and you dictated that profit margin. When you're going out and selling into the local marketplace, sometimes you get to these locations, somebody says they'll give the price, and you get there and they'll be like, it's not what I thought, can you go a little bit lower? So your business isn't run necessarily as efficient in my opinion. But when starting out, buy local, sell local is a great way to make some extra cash. And I know based on the timing of this video, a lot of you are gonna say, oh, there's stuff going on. Well, that's a risk reward thing. Again, I'm not here to tell you go wear a mask or do this, but take precautions, do what you need to do, don't make excuses. If you want the money, you'll go find a way to do it. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, I was gonna tell you guys, if you wanna take this out of the side hustle, there is the potential to go ahead and kind of go two routes. So obviously you've seen those U-Break Guide fixes and cell phone repair shops. You can go down that route. That can potentially be automated. Usually you start out as the guy doing everything. I definitely looked at that route, but I just didn't want to get into retail. I just didn't think it was a good long-term play. But I know a couple buddies of mine that have had a lot of success kind of franchising those out. And the other way is just simply being that person that you were potentially shipping those phones out to. Being that wholesaler, that's a whole nother game that I don't really know too much about. There might be videos on YouTube, but I think it's one of those things where you just have to earn your respect in the industry, and then you get to a point where you meet and network with enough people where they kind of show you the ropes of what you need to do and who are those next buyers that where you're the middleman, they buy even higher. That game is a lot more volume based where you're not going to be making $100 on a phone. A lot of the times you're making 10, 20 bucks, but you're doing volume and buying like 50, 100 a day. But I know for most of you, this is just a potential side hustle. So really, how do you get started and what are those basic first steps for you to go out, click out of this video after I'm done. Hopefully you can stay for the whole thing and go make that first $100, $200, $300 in profit. So one, again, is picking a phone. If you're an iPhone user, I'd recommend going and looking for iPhones. Another one is if you're an Android user, go find another Android if you're comfortable with it. Before you're going out and just bidding on these phones, you need to know what they're selling for. So go research that value. I'd look on apps like OfferUp, which you're gonna be bidding and selling a lot on. Facebook Marketplace, which is kind of like the next one, and probably one of the worst, but there's still deals that happen on there, is Craigslist. The third step is just go build out those profiles. So one of the reasons I got a lot of deals in the phone flipping niche, because I was in a super competitive market, is simply for the fact of I built a reputation. I had a ton of 5-star reviews on OfferUp, and people just trusted me a little bit more than the average guy. And a lot of the times I just use my reputation as leverage to get lower prices. And then the last and final technique, so a lot of you probably are getting in this because you want some extra money. And what does that mean? You probably don't have a ton just sitting around in your bank account. So start on those cheaper phones. In today's day and age, they're definitely different than when I started at the iPhone 6s and 7s, but that might look like an iPhone X right now. Is probably one of the cheaper devices, working your way all the way up until like the 12 Pro Maxes. Start at those cheaper devices. Once you flip that one, just reinvest it back in, and once you get to that higher price device, the profit margins are really big, and it just becomes sort of a rinse and repeat business model. And for those of you that are comparing this to couch flipping or shoe flipping, it just really depends on what kind of route you want to go down. Yeah, you might make $700, $800, $900 on a couch flip, but how many of those are you able to really do in a day? That's just something you have to kind of weigh in and out when looking at your options for a buy low, sell high game. So with that said, that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. Again, if you guys want all the technical stuff and want to get really down to the nitty gritty of exactly how to do it, there really is no point of purchasing any courses. I have about 100 to 200 videos down in my YouTube channel. You just got to dig a little bit deeper. They were filmed a couple years ago, but a lot of that information still applies. Pretty much the only thing that's changing is carriers, especially with like T-Mobile and Sprint merging, and then also the prices of these devices. So if you guys found some value in today's video, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and if you guys have any questions, shoot me a comment down below. I'll be sure to get to it as best as I can, whether it's today when I'm filming this if you're watching it, or potentially in a year. I'll do my best to always get back to you, just because I appreciate you guys being here and showing support to the channel. So with that said, that's it for today. Hope you guys have a good one. Peace.